This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We are now 5 full weeks into this 2024 NFL season and still trying to identify which teams are good because, frankly, there's a lot that's up in the air in that regard because a lot of teams that I've expected to play very well to open up this year have not done so. So it's hard to identify who's at the top. Today, we're going to take a look at what my numbers say and identify who my power rankings are identifying as teams that maybe have underperformed thus far and could make a surge going into this year. I'm going to look at a couple of futures I like at FanDuel Sportsbook, one win total for this year, one divisional future, and then take a look ahead to NFL week number 6 and try to identify my favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook across the week. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to break down my up-to-date NFL power rankings, letting you know some teams that I want to buy low on, some teams that could be a bit underrated in the market, and my top bets across NFL week number 6. We'll dive into all that here in just 1 second, but first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Tomorrow, Dr. Ed Feng is back with us, breaking down his best bets across college football in a jam-packed week number 7. That'll be live on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, 4 p.m. Eastern, breaking down Ed's thoughts there. So if you want to tune in with me and Ed tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern on this brand new YouTube page. If you're watching there right now, leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate those of you watching over on the brand new YouTube page for the Covering the Spread and Heat Check podcast. And also make sure you're subscribed there to get notifications as we go live each and every weekday. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona, Colorado, DC, Iowa, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, I wanted to get things today by talking about my updated NFL power rankings, letting you know which teams I think might be a bit undervalued in the futures market at FanDuel Sportsbook. And when I was watching Sunday's game, to me, it was pretty obvious the Bengals were a team that I wanted to be in on in some capacity because the offense looked good for now a third consecutive week, and they moved the ball well against the Ravens. Defense was not good, but the Bengals should have won that game. So I was like, okay, liked what I saw from Joe Burrow. Love seeing both T. Higgins, Jamar Chase looking healthy. I wanted to buy into the Bengals. So my first instinct was to go to this playoff tab over at FanDuel Sportsbook and check out betting the Bengals to make the playoffs, thinking maybe they'd be undervalued there because their record is 1-4. But then you look at this number at FanDuel Sportsbook, and apparently everybody else had the exact same idea because the Bengals only plus 138 to make, or they're plus 138 to make the playoffs right now. That to me is insane, given that they are 1-4 right now. They're in a division with the Ravens, who are near the top of my power rankings. I believe they are second as of right now. And they're there with the Steelers, who, despite having some flukiness, are still 3-2 right now. So it's a tough division for them to win the division, given they're 2 games behind both those teams. And that's probably going to be one of the wild card teams as well. You've got Some teams in the AFC South that are pretty intriguing. I think that you look at the Texans there. I think that they're going to be able to make the playoffs. Maybe the Colts are able to do something with what they've done so far. I don't know what the path to the playoffs is for the Bengals, at least at plus 138. So I wanted to bet them there, given how good they looked. I just don't think that number is very good personally at plus 138 for the Bengals. Lucky for us, there is an alternate path to take if you want to buy into the Bengals. Over at FanDuel Sportsbook, you can find updated win totals for this year. Right now, the Bengals are plus 110 to win over 8.5 games this year. And now they are 1-4, but when you take a look at my preseason win total projections, I actually had the Bengals projected to win 7.59 more games across the rest of this year. They've got a pretty weak schedule, frankly, the rest of the way. They get the Browns, who have been downgraded. They get the Browns twice, actually. They get the Raiders, who are a team potentially spiraling right now. And the Cowboys game looks a bit more winnable. The Titans do as well. So I wanted to buy in the Bengals to make the playoffs, but at plus 138, did not see value there. Instead, I think over 8.5 wins at plus 110 is the better bet here. They can go over 8.5 wins and still miss the playoffs, and I like that increased flexibility. So my route to buying in the Bengals will be via their win total over 8.5 wins. That is plus 110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I don't mind if you want to bet the playoff number. I just don't see it as being a value. I know that, again, there is overlap where they win 9 games and make the playoffs, so you kind of may want the better number. But for me personally, it's hard to see value given that maybe the Jets come soaring back. Out in the West, the Chargers have actually looked okay, especially defensively so far this year. I just think it might be a tight squeeze for them to make the playoffs, even though I think that they'll play a really good football down the stretch. So to me, best route for buying the Bengals is over 8.5 wins at plus 110. When I look at my power rankings, the Bengals are currently 7th in both models and 10th if I exclude my prior. So they're the one team I wanted to buy into. Another team that's kind of high right now for me is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're 10th in one model for me and 9th in the other. I've got 2 separate models. One is an older model I've been working with for a longer time. Other one is one, it doesn't get as much weight in my week-to-week betting, but it does still factor in there because wisdom of the crowd is a different process, and it does back test better for me if I factor in both those models. The Buccaneers, 10th in one, 9th in the other, and they look even better in just the 2024 numbers, specifically because their offense has been phenomenal. Their early down passing numbers are the best in football by a good chunk. And that was not the case last year, where they were kind of relying on late down magic. This year, they've been good on early downs, at least through the air. And the late down efficiency has still been there as well. The rushing efficiency has been bad for the Buccaneers, but maybe more Bucky Irving can help with that. So I like a lot of what they've done. Now, the Buccaneers defense has not been great. They've been more so close to average on the defensive side of the football. But it's important to remember that they played most of this year without Antoine Winfield Jr., who should be back here pretty soon, I would think. Vita Vea playing through an MCL sprain. Kalijah Kancey's missed some time as well. And those aren't long-term injuries where they could realistically have all 3 of those guys playing this upcoming week. The defense has still been good enough, though, to inspire hope that once they get those guys back, they could be an above-average unit. So I think that this Buccaneers team is a better team now than they were last year because the bones of the offense are better. They're doing it in a more sustainable way by winning through the air on early downs. The record is currently 3-2 for the Buccaneers, which is tied for the Falcons atop the NFC South. Now, the Falcons had the tiebreaker here because they won last week, but these 2 teams will still face each other in Tampa later on this year. So to me, I don't think it's a death sentence for Tampa that they lost that game to Atlanta. The Falcons ranked 11th for me in one model and 13th in the other, which means the Buccaneers are ahead of them in both those models. The Bucs right now are plus 220 to win the NFC South. And I do think that that's a value. As you know, I've been tied to the Saints quite a bit this year, but Derek Carr may miss time with that oblique strain. It's not like he wants to play Sunday, but the betting markets are saying that's probably not going to happen. The Buccaneers are favored by 2.5 in that game, whereas I believe it was 2.5 the other way prior to Monday Night Football. So I actually don't mind the Bucs at plus 220 to win the NFC South. I think that they match up pretty well with the Falcons. Should have a good shot to win that rematch later on this year. I think they're a good overall team with a more sustainable offense. I think that's pretty intriguing. The Buccaneers, if you don't want to deal with that playoff tiebreaker with the Falcons, you can bet the Bucs. They were plus 102 to make the playoffs earlier on today. Still there right now. I don't mind that. I just prefer the divisional future because I think that they're just a better team than Atlanta. And I think that will show out down the road once that defense gets back healthy again. So if I'm looking across the futures market at FanDuel Sportsbook entering week 6, the two futures I want to grab are the Bengals over 8.5 wins plus 110. And I want to bet the Bucs to make the playoffs, currently sitting at plus 102. Let's shift focus now and take a look at the week 6 odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. There is a bet I'd like for this Thursday night football game between the 49ers and the Seahawks. It is tough to lay 3.5 on the road in a divisional game on a short week, but my numbers just think the Niners are a better team than the Seahawks right now. So I want to lay the 3.5 with the Niners, which is currently minus 102 at FanDuel Sports, because the Niners are still at the top of my power rankings in both models. If I look at just 2024 data, with again, 0 snaps of Christian McCaffrey, they do still rank third there because they've been good. They just had weird things break against them. This offense is fully healthy right now. And sure, the Seahawks are too, but they also just got torched by the Giants last week, specifically on the ground. Now, whereas the Niners lost by what I think was a pretty fluky outcome, I don't think that was true with the Seahawks. Like, they had to kick a field goal to tie things up late, and that field goal got blocked. So the final score was not indicative of how that game went, but I think the Giants did play better in that one, whereas the Niners, to me, outplayed the Cardinals. So I do like laying 3.5 here with the Niners on Thursday Night Football. And you could look at that number and say, okay, we're laying 3.5 again, and that's around a key number because we want to get that win on 3, and we're not getting that here. If you're looking at my model, I've got the Niners favored by 6.7 here. Historically, in my model, teams favored by 6.7 points have covered 3.5 points 58% of the time. And we're laying minus 102 on this here. So I think that's a good enough number for us to still go with it. Maybe I'm too high on the Niners. Maybe I'm too low on the Seahawks. But again, when I look at just the 2024 data, where the Seahawks have been, at least to my eyes, pretty impressive, I'm still not seeing it. This defense is horrible, despite the fact, again, they had most of their key guys, minus Byron Murphy, back for that Giants game. Leonard Williams played. A lot of their other front 7 guys played in that game. They still did not play well. So Seattle towards the bottom of my defensive power rankings right now. The offense for Seattle has looked good and they've been fun, but I don't get why they're not running the football more often. Like, Geno's good, but do you want Geno dropping back 40 times behind this offensive line? I personally kind of don't. And you look at this matchup here with the Niners. The Niners have been very good against the pass, not as good against the rush defensively. So if Ryan Grubb keeps this approach where he goes air raid heavy on early downs, I think that'll lead to some issues. Maybe he does run the football a bit more as he gets more comfortable. They get in better matchups. I just haven't seen that quite yet. So I do think there is value in the Niners here, minus 3.5 and minus 102. I know the Niners were unkind to us last week, so I was on them against the Cardinals and they lost that game outright, but I think there is value here. So I do like the Niners minus 3.5 and minus 102 on that Thursday night football game. Pretty fun game coming up on Sunday. That is between the Detroit Lions and the Dallas Cowboys. This game was so fun last year in the stretch run of the regular season. Right now, the Cowboys are catching 3 points at home at minus 105. Now, you got to account for the fact that the Lions are coming off their bye, and that is a bump of about 0.6 points for me in my model. So you give the Lions a bump of 0.6 points, but put this game down in Dallas. I have a hard time making the Lions 3-point favorites. So I do want to take the Cowboys plus 3. That is currently minus 105 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, stylistically, this is a tough matchup for Dallas because the Lions are a really good rushing football team, and the Cowboys, as we know, are really struggling so far this year. And the Lions have shown across the entire tenure of Ben Johnson, if they've got a good matchup, they're willing to pound that rock time and time again. But they have benefited from a plus schedule in terms of their rushing. They're still an above average rushing offense, but they're not otherworldly. The Cowboys are similar, where they look better on defense once you adjust for the rushing offenses they have faced. The Cowboys offense can't run the football, and we know that. But you don't do that against the Lions. Lions rush defense is pretty good, so teams actually have thrown against thrown against the Lions on 64% of early down plays. That is among the highest marks in the league, and they're below average pass defense on early downs. So I think that what we'll see here is the Cowboys be pretty effective when they decide to throw the football in early downs, which is exactly what they want to do. I think we'll see a good Dak game here. The ground game for them won't be as big of a detriment because they can move the football through the air against this Lions defense. So the Cowboys, I think, just kind of match up well with Detroit, which is nice. I do like the money line too. That's at plus 142 right now, but because we're laying just minus 105 to get a push on 3, I find that pretty enticing. I've got the Cowboys 52% to cover that number, 6% to push, and 44% to win this game outright. So they wind up being a value in all 3 areas. And I think that the money line is I just think that the spread is the best route here because we do get a win on 3. We get a win on 1 or 2 as well. And I think that's pretty enticing given that the Lions can go with that ground and pound attack. So don't mind the money line if you want to go that way. Again, it is plus 142 right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, but slight lean towards the spread minus 105. I could very well change my mind on that throughout the day, but we're currently leaning with the spread plus 3, which is minus 105. Couple of unders once again this week in the NFL. Now, I was on unders last week. Both of my favorite bets for totals were unders. Neither of those wound up hitting, and it could be okay. Scoring environments changing the NFL, something like that. But we've also seen totals go way up for this week in the NFL. So I think we might have seen a bit of an overreaction in the betting markets based on the increased scoring we saw in week number 6. I do think there is value, and I don't think it's bad to buy in on some unders for this week. The first one I want to buy into is for this Falcons versus Panthers game. Under 47.5 is minus 112. Primarily, I want to fade the Panthers offense. They turned back into a pumpkin last week. Tough matchup on the road against the Bears, but also Xavier Legette got banged up in that game. He may be able to go, but it's also worth monitoring what his status is. And the Falcons defense at least has outperformed my expectations on early downs this year. They're just getting torched late in the downs, which means that they could be due for some positive regression defensively once things stabilize on 3rd and 4th down. And they could wind up being, when all is said and done, an above average defense. The Panthers defense is an absolute horror show, which is scary, given we're betting it under here and it keeps on getting worse. So maybe the Falcons can get there all by themselves. That happened with the Bears this past week when we were on the under there. The Bears basically did all work by themselves to get the over there. I just don't see a ton of points on the Panthers side in the short run. Dealing with some wind here. The wind speed projection is currently 9 miles per hour for this game. So I got this total closer to 44 points, and it's at 47.5 right now. I think that's too high. So we'll take the under for Falcons versus Panthers, minus 112 at 47.5. Again, fading this Panthers offense, buying into some regression for the Falcons defense as well. Other total I like is for what is weirdly kind of shaping up to be a fun game, and a team that we were talking about earlier on, Cincinnati Bengals. Their total as they face the Giants on Sunday Night Football is 48.5. Under is minus 105. I do like that number as well. Kind of a similar setup where we got some bad defenses in this game, at least on one side, because the Bengals defense is awful, but it also is still the Giants. They had one good showing last week against the Seahawks, and that shouldn't alter the way we view them all that much. They had a special teams touchdown that game, as mentioned, with that blocked field goal late in the game. If we look at just 2024 data alone, the Giants ranked 25th in my offensive power rankings. So still not very high on this offense. The Bengals do rank 3rd, but the Giants defense is more middle of the pack than bad. They're ranked 17th there, again, based on just 2024 data, because Dexter Lawrence is a difference maker and a guy who can move the needle all by himself. And I think he could do well here against this Bengals interior offensive line. That's not to say I don't like the Bengals. They're 3.5 point favorites here. I don't mind them. But maybe that presence of Lawrence slows them down enough to allow us to get an under here. There also is wind in play for this one. It's at 9 miles per hour, which does downgrade the total. So we got one really good offense here in the Bengals, one bad offense, I think, in the Giants, one really bad defense in the Bengals, and one average defense. I don't think those factors add up to a total of 48.5. I have it closer to 45. So I think the under is the right play here for the Giants versus the Bengals on Sunday Night Football. Under 48.5 is minus 105. So again, my favorite week 6 bets at FanDuel Sportsbook, Giants Bengals under 48.5 minus 105. Like the Cowboys +3 at minus 105. Like in the under for Falcons versus Panthers at 47.5 at minus 112. And then on Thursday Night Football, like in the Niners minus 3.5. That is minus 102 at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. As mentioned, back with you once again tomorrow talking about college football week 7, a loaded slate with Dr. Ed Fank. He'll be with us on Wednesday, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern on this FanDuel football betting YouTube page. Turn on notifications there, hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe to get notifications as we go live each and every weekday. If you got any questions for me, I am on X at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Want to give a big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.